All right, let's jump right into this. Today we're going through an incredibly candid, deeply personal explainer covering the completely unexpected reality of ovarian cyst surgery. We are pulling directly from a very raw, first-hand vlog experience shared by Yumi Kazuki. We're going to break down the whole shebang, from that sudden, shocking diagnosis to the operating room, and even some highly unexpected, well, let's just call them nighttime terrors in the recovery ward. So if you've ever wondered what it actually takes to navigate a major medical curveball like this, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it. You know, this quote really hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures our inciting incident. Picture this. You're a perfectly healthy 30-something. You go in for a routine, comprehensive health checkup, what they call a Ninjin doc in Japan, and bam, you walk out with a life-altering diagnosis. She had absolutely no symptoms. Zero. None. It was obviously a massive shock, but finding it early, just silently brewing in her body, that was literally her saving grace, because it gave her the critical time she needed to prepare both mentally and logistically. So here is how we're breaking this all down today. First up, sudden discovery and prep. Then, the pre-surgery reality. After that, the 3-hour surgery. Then we'll cover post-op pain and the strange night. And we'll wrap it all up with some crucial lessons. Okay, part 1. Sudden discovery and prep. Now, ovarian cysts are definitely not one-size-fits-all, right? Even within the exact same family. Yumi discovered she had a 9 by 6 centimeter dermoid cyst on her left side. Her sister, interestingly enough, also had a left-sided cyst, but hers was totally different. It was a mushy, liquid type, and it grew to a massive 23 centimeters. That's huge! It really just goes to show how wildly differently these silent conditions can actually manifest in the body. So normally, a surgery like this requires a streamlined 4 to 5 day process, but Yumi was so stressed out by the idea of this thing just living inside her, especially because her sister warned her that larger cysts can twist and cause a massive medical emergency, that she opted for literally whatever schedule allowed for the absolute fastest extraction. She actually went in on Friday for her initial tests, got to go home for the weekend, and then came right back on Sunday for prep, all just to guarantee she was first in line for Monday morning surgery. Moving right along to part 2, pre-surgery reality. Let me tell you, hospital prep is not glamorous at all. First off, she was working frantically until 2 in the morning the night before her Friday admission, just desperately trying to clear her schedule. Then, trying to be practical, she realized she could save a few bucks by buying cheap medical underwear, those T-bands, right at the hospital convenience store instead of ordering them online. She even had to do a dental check just to make sure her teeth wouldn't accidentally chip on the anesthesia tubes. And then, the prep. Taking laxatives, which, spoiler alert, completely failed to work, plus the sheer indignity of having her underarms and lower body prepped and shaved by the nursing staff. This is the unvarnished, gritty truth of hospital admission, folks. Oh, I love this part. Staring down days of liquid diets and fasting, she had a moment of pure, understandable desperation. We'll call it the 6:59 p.m. pudding negotiation. She literally negotiated with the nursing staff to let her inhale just one single pudding right before the super strict 7 p.m. food cutoff. Honestly, it's a deeply relatable, totally human moment when you know you're about to face major surgery. But sad to say, that pudding was her last moment of fun. The morning of the surgery is basically a brutal checklist. At 6 a.m., strict fasting kicks in. No food, not even a tiny sip of water. By 7 a.m., remember those laxatives from the night before that totally failed? Yeah, because of that, she had to endure not 1 but 2 enemas. Yikes. And finally, by 9 a.m., she was literally walking herself down the hospital hallway and right into the operating room. Which brings us to part 3, the 3-hour surgery. Fortunately for all of us, medical science is pretty incredible these days. Instead of having to leave a massive open abdominal scar, her doctors performed laparoscopic surgery. Basically, they inflated her stomach like a balloon to create working room and then did the entire surgery through 3 tiny little holes. We're talking 1 hole measuring just 3 centimeters and 2 that were only 1.5 centimeters. They used these specialized, super long instruments to carefully pull the cyst out without causing major trauma to the rest of the body. But what exactly were they pulling out of those tiny holes? Well, her sister jokingly called the extracted dermoid cyst a curse. And why is that? Because believe it or not, it literally contained human hair, skin fragments, and teeth. I know, it sounds like a horror movie, right? But it's actually a fascinating, albeit slightly horrifying medical reality. Dermoid cysts are formed from embryonic cells that can basically grow into any type of tissue. Just wild. All right, on to part 4. Post-op pain and the strange night. Waking up from anesthesia brought this huge wave of relief that the curse was finally out of her body. But she definitely went into recovery with some overly high expectations. She was confident, thinking, hey, I've survived cosmetic liposuction on my arms before. I am totally tough enough to handle this. The reality, though, she couldn't even sit up because her core muscle fascia had been cut, even through those tiny holes. It meant that every single breath, every cough, every tiny little twitch was just absolute agony. To prevent blood clots and actually get her recovery moving, the nurses basically gave her a terrifying ultimatum. Step 1, force yourself to sit up, right through that searing pain. Step 2, physically walk to the bathroom. And if and only if you can do that, step 3, you finally get that incredibly uncomfortable urinary catheter removed. She tried first thing in the morning and completely failed. But she pushed through the pain, dug deep, and managed a successful second attempt right before noon, which thankfully led to step 4, the sheer unmatched joy of finally eating solid, albeit very bland, hospital food. But the physical pain wasn't actually the end of her ordeal, which leads to a very chilling question. What do you think was the absolute most terrifying part of her second night in the hospital? So the surgical pain was intense, sure, but something way more sinister kept her awake. The ghostly hands. Seriously. In her dark, suddenly empty 4-person hospital room, because the other patients had all been discharged, she felt the distinct, terrifying sensation of tiny, unseen hands repeatedly pressing down and tapping directly on her fresh surgical cuts. And it wasn't just once, it happened 3 or 4 times. No way, right? So how exactly do you handle a haunted recovery ward when you can barely even walk? Well, she absolutely refused to be tricked by hospital ghosts again. The very next night, she stayed up working on her laptop just to avoid falling asleep out of sheer fear. She used these incredibly slow, painful walks to the hallway vending machine as a distraction and, honestly, as physical rehab. And eventually, she was just so exhausted and terrified that she practically begged the nurses for sleeping pills, literally for the very first time in her entire life, just so she could survive the rest of her stay. Finally, part 5, crucial lessons. So she eventually gets discharged, successfully escapes the hospital, and immediately books a salon appointment just to finally get her hair washed by a professional. But she returned home with some massive life lessons. 200,000. That's 200,000 yen, which is roughly around $1,300 depending on the exchange rate. That was the total billed cost for the entire medical ordeal. The hospital stay, the surgery, the medications, the whole 9 yards. And this right here is a real game changer. It perfectly illustrates why planning ahead is absolutely crucial. See, her sister didn't have private insurance when her cyst was discovered, so she had to rely heavily on Japan's high-cost medical care benefits after getting slapped with a massive bill. But Yumi? She had proactively bought comprehensive women's medical insurance right around her 30th birthday, back when she was perfectly healthy. And because of that one smart, forward-thinking decision, that 200,000 yen bill was essentially completely covered. Her out-of-pocket costs, practically zero. So the takeaways from this explainer are totally undeniable. First, whatever you do, do not skip your preventative screenings or your comprehensive checkups. Diseases hide silently, and catching them early is the only way you get to dictate the timeline of your treatment rather than the disease dictating it for you. Second, and I really cannot stress this enough based on her journey, buy comprehensive medical insurance before you actually get sick. When you think you don't need it, yeah, that is exactly when you should be buying it. We are all statistically living longer, which means we have to be investing in both our daily health habits and our financial emergency backup plans. Which leaves us with this final, somewhat sobering thought. If a silent health crisis struck you tomorrow, are you physically and financially prepared to handle the journey? It's a heavy question to end on, for sure, but an incredibly important one. Take control of your health today. Schedule those checkups, review your safety nets, so you aren't caught off guard tomorrow. Thanks for diving into this with us.